You guys ready? All right. Who has children? I talk about children a lot because, I'm in it. I'm, deep in children right now. I have 3.5. My half is almost here. I do believe the half is a living being, just to be clear. I don't mean half, not quite human yet. I mean, they're human, but we just are only dealing on, anyway. Okay. This is going nowhere. All right. So does anybody, whether you have kids or whether you don't, maybe you have friends that have done this. So just imagine your context and think about what could possibly be happening. So my context is I have children. Not that this never happens with adults, because it does. So I want to be very clear about that. But sometimes you'll be somewhere and you'll hear a loud bang, or you hear something and you don't really know what's going on. So you go in the room and you're like, what just happened? And who knows? There's a lamp that's on the ground. There's water that's spilled everywhere. Something happened. Some tornado went through there, and you said, what happened? Who did it? And they're both and they don't want to take the blame, so they're both my oldest will say, well, Juliana told me to jump off of the bed, and no, okay, but still, is it her fault or is it your fault for jumping? And Juliana will be like, I don't know. I'll be like, what? I don't know. I'll be like, okay. I'm glad you don't know. It's I don't know. So you're up there and you're kind of figuring it out. You become like Inspector Gadget, right? You're like, I got to figure out where's the clues, what's happening, because nobody's taking responsibility. You're kind of walking in. So has anybody ever walked into a room where there's adults? And it's saying, I don't know. They don't say it like that, but they kind of they're like, how do I sneak out of this room as fast as possible so they don't ask me if I actually did it, because I did. Right? So why are you bringing this up, Mike? Why is this important? Well, I personally believe that one of the greatest marks of maturity, one of the greatest of the greats of maturity, is when someone stops blaming others and starts taking responsibility for what happens in their lives. And we see that kids, we kind of expect that kids would do that, right? But I have found that there are times in my own life, or that I've seen in other people's lives, or where there's something inside of us that says, how can we shift the responsibility, or how can we shift the blame so it doesn't make us look bad, or it doesn't make us feel bad, or it doesn't make us whatever, right? How can we make other people feel like it's not our fault? And so I believe that one of the greatest marks of maturity is when you can take the responsibility for what is yours. What did you actually accomplish here? What was the consequence that you actually brought upon yourself? Why is your life so bad? Because of something that you have done, we all don't get a perfect life to grow up in, but it also is not our job just to keep pointing fingers and shifting blame. We have to figure it out. So a good question to ask, that same question that I would ask my kids, is the same question we need to be asking ourselves, which is this question: who's to blame? Let's pray. God, we thank you so much for your scriptures. We thank you for this authority that we have, that we can read, not for information only, but for transformation. I pray, God, that you would enlighten your word to us, that we would understand what you're saying, that as we are observing the context and trying to figure out what you were saying, I pray, God, that it would be applicable to our lives, that we could be more like you. I pray here this morning that as we are looking through Acts chapter 25, we will see who was more responsible and who was less responsible, and who took the blame and who didn't take the blame, who shifted the blame and who brought it upon themselves. And Lord, I just ask that you would help us to know what we're supposed to do as Christians. I pray, God, that I would be anointed to hear what you continue to say to me, and that you would anoint my lips to say everything that you want me to say. Lord, help me to say all those things and help my mouth to stay shut for the things I'm not supposed to say here this morning. I pray right now for everybody listening and watching that you would anoint their ears and their heart to hear what you're saying to them. God, I pray that you would illuminate your word here this morning, that we would learn something new, and that Paul, and during his life, that this was recorded in the Scriptures for a reason and a purpose that maybe we haven't found out yet. Help us, Lord. In your name, Jesus, amen. So the reason why I kind of prayed a little bit towards this thing in Acts, because what Acts really felt like was for like more than half of Acts, it was like go, 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 stuff happening, crazy stuff that we could like continue to like pull out and learn from, like in all varying ways. And now we've kind of slowed down, and we're watching Paul's life over years of basically being imprisoned and on trial and with hearings, and it kind of feels a little bit repetitive. But I have to believe that if the Lord allowed it to be in here, there has to be something that we can learn from it. Even if it is, at times in our lives, it feels like our life is just dragging out. Maybe the Lord is trying to speak to us through that way. I'm not sure that that's the only way, but I do believe that could be a way. So we're not just going to stop in Acts. We're going to continue. We're going to finish it out. We have 25, 26, 27, 28. That's 4 more chapters. And today we will probably knock out 25. Okay? So turn to Acts 25 if you're not there. If you don't know how to get there, ask your neighbor. Maybe they'll know. And there's a couple key elements that I'll be drawing out today of things that were happening, and I hope that they're helpful. Are you there? All right. Are you not there? All right. All right, so let me just give you a quick backdrop of what just happened. Literally, I'm not going to give you a lot. I'm just going to give you a little bit. All right, the little bit is that Paul was imprisoned for 2 years. And the guy that was kind of watching over him was named Felix, okay? And now Festus comes in, and when Felix left, he decided to leave Paul there in order to basically do a favor for the Jews, okay? That's the backdrop. That's what we're diving in from. And so we're going to see right away Festus is, he's talked about. So let's talk about him. Ready? Now, 3 days after Festus had arrived in the province, 3 days, 1, 2, 3, 72 hours, okay? He's on duty for 3 days. That's it. He went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. Now, this guy immediately gets into position, right? All of a sudden he has this leadership position that he's in, and he gets to work. He leaves Caesarea, and he goes to Jerusalem. And why does he do that? We'll find out in a second. But I think it's really important to think about this handoff that happened. A lot of people will skip over this. They'll be like, oh, it was a handoff. I just want to talk about it just a little bit, which is this. The handoff from Felix to Festus, in my opinion, is probably important, and it's an important note for us to understand. Why did Luke tell us this? I think because it's important for us to know. Felix was considered a bad man, okay? Felix wasn't considered a great governor. He wasn't considered a good leader. He did things that were not cool or inappropriate. Remember, like he would meet with Paul, and all this time he's like just expecting money and bribes, and like he did a lot of things that weren't great, okay? But, however, Festus coming in, you can look up historically, he was known as a pretty good leader. He did things a little bit more above par than Felix did. So Festus was a little bit different. Now, was he perfect? Well, are any of us? You know, I think we could answer that question. But history shows that he did lead fairly well. So let's see how he acts in this chapter as we unravel a bit more about him. He's not the only person we'll be talking about today, but he is one of them. So let's go to verse 2. And the chief priests and the principal men of the Jews laid out their case against Paul. And they urged him, asking as a favor against Paul that he summon him to Jerusalem. because they were planning an ambush to kill him on the way. Now, just remember, this conversation is most likely happening like in Jerusalem, right? Festus leaves Caesarea, goes to Jerusalem. While he's there, chief priests and principal men of the Jews start talking to him and basically say, can you bring him here? Can you bring him to Jerusalem? Why did they ask that question, first of all? Can you bring him to Jerusalem? Do you guys know why? They wanted to kill him. It said that they wanted to kill him, but what even more so than just wanting to kill him? They know that they have more power in Jerusalem than they did there. They knew that if Paul stayed in Caesarea, that he was going to be charged according to Caesarean law, or Roman law, and then if he was charged according to Roman law, they wouldn't actually be able to put probably penalties on him because he wasn't really doing anything against Roman law. But in Jerusalem, they could say, well, you were going against Jewish law, which is different, right? There's a little bit more to the oral tradition, and especially if you're a Pharisee, there's lots of rules and laws that you follow. So anyway, they urged him because they wanted to kill him, and they knew that they had more power in Jerusalem than they did in any of the other Roman cities. Festus replied that Paul was being kept at Caesarea and that he himself intended to go there shortly. So, said he, let the men of authority among you go down with me, and if there is anything wrong about the man, let them bring charges against him. So, what does it sound like Festus is doing? To me, it sounds like Festus is saying, listen, if you actually have stuff against him, come down. Let's do a trial. Let's have a hearing. Let's go through the process. Because if he is guilty, then he'll be charged, right? So there should be nothing wrong with us doing this according to law as long as we're talking about him doing stuff against the law, right? Like to Festus, he's like, this is how we do it. This is like normal policy. This is the way that it should be. This is the way that we should judge people. This is what it should look like. Also, knowing Festus probably knew that Paul was a Roman citizen. And you can't just let Roman citizens go without, there's a specific thing that the accusers must meet the accusee face to face before they release them to somewhere else. So this was being brought in saying like, well, we have rules here. We have some steps. So if you actually want to do that, if that's something you want to do, first come down and accuse him face to face. Okay? So there are rules in place, and Festus is making them play by the rules. Okay? Felix, he was trying to skirt some of the rules. All right. Let's see, where are we? Okay. After he stayed among them not more than 8 or 10 days, he went down to Caesarea. And the next day he took his seat on the tribunal and ordered Paul to be brought. When he had arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many and serious charges against him that they could not prove. Okay. Tangent number 1. It's not really a tangent. There are people in this world, Christians and non-Christians, that will accuse you of being or doing or saying things that aren't necessarily true. And so what are you going to do with things that aren't true? Are you going to believe them and let them completely haunt you? Are you going to defend yourself? Are you going to allow God to defend you? There's a couple of choices that we have to make, but this is true. People will bring stuff up that isn't necessarily true, or that they can't necessarily prove. I just want you to know that's a fact in life. If you want to walk around and have everybody pat you on the back, it's not going to happen. Okay? It didn't happen to Jesus. It doesn't happen to his disciples. It doesn't happen to his apostles. And if you follow Jesus, it will not happen to you. Okay? People won't just pat you on the back because you're a good person. I promise you that. And likely you make some mistakes too, so it's just worse for you then, right? Because you're human and you make mistakes. And people don't like when people make mistakes because they do too. And if you make a mistake, then they can blame you for their own problems. So who's to blame? Okay, let's hop back in. Verse 8. Paul argued in his defense. So his choice was to argue in his defense. Now, to be honest, this was like a hearing or a trial. So I mean, it makes sense, right, that he would make a defense. Neither against the law of the Jews. Now listen to this list. Ready? This is an important list. Neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I committed any offense. Remember last week we talked about the importance of integrity. Now the importance of integrity we're watching here as in reaction, right? So like what happens after you have integrity? You can say and prove that you've had integrity. Here he is saying, I've never sinned, I've never done anything against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against even Caesar, okay? Which means both Jew and Roman, I have not done a thing wrong. I have lived by the law. And what he's even saying is, I have lived by the Jewish law, all right? So maybe I'll get into this a little bit in a couple weeks, but since it's only going to be in a couple weeks because we have Palm Sunday and then Easter and then whatever, let's talk about Pharisees just briefly. Paul was a Pharisee. Pharisees were the strictest sect of religious people in Jewish land, in Judea, okay? So they were so strict that they decided that they would have 600 plus laws that they have to follow in order to be righteous, okay? Not just that, but they also had to follow like rituals, and they also had to follow certain oral traditions so that they could be righteous, perfect, like in the sight of God, right? In God's eyesight. And that's who they were. So when Paul's saying this, he's saying, listen, I've kept it. I've walked through it. I've done it. I've done everything that I could in my due diligence to be the greatest Pharisee I could have been, as well as the greatest person that visits the temple, as well as the greatest Roman citizen that I could have been. So if he didn't have this track record, maybe they would find him out, So let's see what happens after this. He says, I committed, or against Caesar have I committed any offense. But Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, said to Paul, do you wish to go up to Jerusalem and there be tried on these charges before me? Why did Festus ask? Because it's Paul's right. Paul actually gets to choose whether he wants to go to Jerusalem or not. Right? Because, why? Because he's a Roman citizen. Okay? Because he's a Roman citizen. So what does Paul say? What does Paul say? Paul said, I am standing before Caesar's tribunal where I ought to be tried. To the Jews I have done no wrong, as you yourself know very well. If then I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything for which I deserve to die, I do not seek to escape death. If I am guilty, kill me. Can you guys say the same thing? Can you be put on a seat where you get judged and say, hey, if you find me guilty, you can kill me? See, Paul lived with such integrity that he was willing to say that in front of the people that could kill him. Like they actually could end his life, right? You know how people like swear on, I swear on my mom. First of all, don't do any of that. Okay, I swear on God, I swear on, but a lot of times the people that they're telling that to is like, well, they're never going to know, they're never going to find out, they won't actually hurt me or kill me. I just, whatever. I just swear, it's fine. Could we do the same? Could we say that we are not to blame in this situation, like for these particular things? Hey, no, it's actually, I know I'm on trial, I understand that, and if you find anything out there that has me disregarding these laws, kill me. If I deserve death, you should kill me. That's what Paul's saying. He was so confident in the man that he was that he could say that confidently. So my question for you is, could you do that too? I have done no wrong, as you yourself know very well. If then I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything for which I deserve to die, I do not seek to escape death. But if there is nothing to their charges against me, no one can give me up to them. Then what does he say right after that? I appeal to Caesar. Another Roman right. Do you know that any person who is a Roman citizen could appeal to Caesar and have a trial face-to-face with Caesar? He has a right. So he chooses to exercise his right and say, I don't know if this is going anywhere. I just know I am doing so okay with these laws and these rules and these things that you can send me all the way to Caesar and I will go there because he'll find me not guilty of these things. Like, I am very sure of who I am. So let's do that. I appeal to Caesar. Then Festus, when he had conferred with his council, answered, to Caesar you have appealed, to Caesar you shall go. I want to be clear, this wasn't a favor for Paul. This was Paul's right. Okay? I think some people read this verse and they're like, wow, Festus had a change of heart. He sent him along. No, it's actually Paul's right. You know? The thing that Festus did do, though, is he followed the law that was in place. Right? He didn't try to skirt around it like we saw some other people do. Who tried to skirt around something just a little while ago? Who was it? It's a group of people. They're religious. The Jews. The Jews, they said, why don't you send them down to Jerusalem? They didn't even say to give them a trial. Do you hear me out? They're like, bring them down for a trial. They're like, but we're just going to kill them. We're not even going to go to trial. We're just going to ambush them and take care of it. Right? Let's skirt around like what we're trying to do to just solve the problem that we want to solve because we feel like solving it. And then Festus is saying, like, listen, regardless of whether you're guilty or whether you're not, you have these rights. We're going to follow these things, and we're going to allow these things to happen in the way that they should happen. You get a hearing? Fine. Then you get a trial? Fine. You want to appeal to Caesar? Fine. Why? Because it's in the law. Because he didn't do anything wrong for the Jews to be able to actually do anything in Roman territory. Okay, so he appeals to Caesar and he says to Caesar, you should go. What happens next? What happens next? Now, when some days had passed, Agrippa the king and Bernice arrived at Caesarea and greeted Festus. Now, this is the first time I think that we're talking about Agrippa. This is Herod Agrippa II, okay, just so you know. And Bernice, which was his sister, arrived at Caesarea and greeted Festus. And as they stayed there many days, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, there is a man left prisoner by Felix, and when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews laid out their case against him, asking for a sentence of condemnation against him. All right, so I just want to stop really quick because this is where Festus, what did he do? Did you guys pick it up? Ready? There is a man left prisoner by Felix. What does that mean to you? What it means to me is that Festus is like, look, I got an issue and it wasn't my fault. It was Felix's fault. So although Festus is known as like a good leader and he's trying to follow the laws, there is still something in him that is human that says like, it was his fault. It wasn't my fault. It was his fault, right? So this guy, Paul, I have a problem I have to deal with, but it's not my fault. It's actually this guy's fault. So King Agrippa, before you get all wild, and before you think that I'm a bad leader, just know that it was Felix, not me, right? You guys never do that. I'm just saying that sometimes people like share about some other surrounding circumstances, say like, clearly I'm dealing with this because of this thing. You guys don't do that. I'm just showing you that that's what he did. Verse 14, and as they stayed there many days, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, there is a man left in prisoner by Felix, and when I was in Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews laid out their case against him, asking for a sentence of condemnation against him. I answered them that it was not the custom of the Romans to give up anyone before the accused met the accusers face to face. I just shared that bit of information with you. And I had opportunity to make his defense concerning the charge laid against him. So when they came together here, I made no delay, but on the next day took my seat on the tribunal and ordered the man to be brought. He was a man of like, let's get it done. Let's dive in. Let's do the work that I'm called to do. I'm going to get it done. That's who he is. When the accusers stood up, they brought no charge in his case of such evils as I supposed. Now, what is Festus sharing here? Festus is saying, like, look, they made such a big commotion about this that I was expecting them to say that this guy is, like, literally a murderer, a terrible person. Like, he's ruining Rome. He's ruining Jerusalem. He's going crazy. Like, he's he has a whole army and he's about to take over and he's a militant and like this is probably what he's expecting. So he tells King Agrippa, he's like, but to be honest, they kind of just had they're just being a little petty. They're just being petty over who Paul is. That's all they're doing. So I don't even know what to do. What's your opinion? Rather, they had certain points to dispute with him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who was dead, but whom Paul asserted to be alive. Okay, so there's this Jesus, and this is the one problem that they have, which is about the resurrection of Jesus. We could talk a long time about Jesus and how in Romans and in Corinthians and in other letters that Paul wrote, his epistles, how he was explaining the different truths of who God is, and that this promised Messiah was actually already here, and that he came to not just be here and hang out, but to reconcile us to God. And these are all answers to the Jewish tradition. These are answers to the Torah. This is stuff that's been talked about. And Paul's saying, this is the answer. It literally says who he is, and here he is, and you guys aren't understanding who he is. To the point where like Paul like loves the Jewish people, like he really does. Jewish people do not really love Paul, or so it seems. Some like him. Some like him. There were Jews that did understand that Jesus was the Messiah that came. But we see that regardless of how much they're hating Paul, he loves them because he wants to see them sanctified and saved. That's what he desires deeply. And so Paul just continues basically getting beat up because he still loves his Jewish brothers. So what was the big difference here? It was that Paul asserted that Jesus was alive. So although Pharisees, now remember we talked about this between Pharisees and Sadducees. Pharisees believe in spirituality. They believe in resurrection. They believe that it's coming. They believe that there is a resurrection to come. They believe that. But when it came to, and the Sadducees do not. But when it came to even Jesus saying Jesus resurrected, they were like, I know that we believe it, but we don't really believe it. It's like we believe that it's coming, but it's going to look how I want it to look. I know that Jesus came this way, but it's going to look how I want it to look. They considered a promised governor or a promised military man or a promised person that's going to take over Rome and beat Rome down. That's what they were expecting. Why? Because they read the Torah and they expected it to be a certain way because that's kind of probably what they wanted, right? So here is my actual first real tangent, which is when we read the Bible, when we read through Scripture, let's do a very good job of drawing out what it says and not figuring out what we want it to say. This is really, really important. The reason why I think the church is in trouble is because we read the Word and we translate it for ourselves how we want it to be translated. That's not okay. Do not do that. Number one, let me just give you a drop. I actually think someday I'm going to do a workshop on Bible study, but I'm not going to do it right this morning. But first step, let me just give you the first step. It's observing. What is happening? Who wrote it? Who are they writing to? What year was this? What was happening around when it was written? All these things matter. Why? Because you can take something that you think means a thing because you don't understand what it meant 2,000 years ago because of the situation that was happening with the governors and the leaders and the tribune and the law of the Jews versus the law of Rome and all this stuff, right? So let's find out what it actually is just saying. Literally, what is it saying? Then once you know that, you can interpret it and understand if it's saying this for them, what does that mean for me? But do not skip the first step. Don't skip the first step. I think what ends up happening is when we skip the first step, that's how we end up getting, like Pharisees and Sadducees, and somehow they're on the Sanhedrin together and they have to try to figure it out. But I don't even know how that worked, okay? I don't know. It's gotta think it looks like the Capitol or something, I don't know. Okay, so anyway, my point is, what is it actually saying? When you read your Bible, find out what it's actually saying. Don't directly translate it for you. Okay. Let's start back in 19 quick. Rather, they had certain points to dispute with him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who is dead, but whom Paul asserted to be alive. See, that was the problem. Being at a loss how to investigate these questions, I asked whether he wanted to go to Jerusalem and be tried there regarding them. Why did he do that? Because it's his right. So he's asking, would you like to do this? Because I don't even know how to respond to this. So would you like to go there and figure it out? But when Paul had appealed to be kept in custody for the decision of the emperor, I ordered him to be held until I could send him to Caesar. Do you understand? He could have been sent unprisoned to Jerusalem to figure out what was going to happen in Jerusalem. He decided that he wanted to stay imprisoned. Paul wanted to stay imprisoned at this moment. Why? Well, I have a few theories. One of them is Jerusalem isn't Rome, and he knew that he was supposed to go to Rome, so maybe that was one. Another is he knew that Caesar was in Rome, so maybe if he appeals to Caesar, he could actually get there. There's a couple things that could have happened. We don't know exactly why, but we do know that it was his right to appeal, which is important. So then Agrippa said to Festus, I would like to hear the man myself. Tomorrow, said he, you will hear him. So it's important to figure this out because technically when Agrippa heard him, it was a hearing, not a trial. Agrippa did not have certain types of authority and power in this area to deal with it in such a context, but he did want to hear him and perhaps give Festus his opinion. Okay? So just so you know, he couldn't necessarily make the decision, but he could certainly help with his opinion. Agrippa has a lot of experience. He's been in leadership for a while. He's dealt with some not fun stuff himself. And so he probably was wiser or more knowledgeable or had more experience than Festus. So he was willing, for some reason, to hear this Paul and give him his opinion. Okay, are we ready? So on the next day, Agrippa and Bernice came with great pomp, and they entered the audience hall with the military tribunes and the prominent men of the city. Can you guys, let's do this again. Close your eyes, and I'm going to read it again. I want you to think of the room filling up, okay? Not our room, but the room that they're in, okay? So on the next day, Agrippa and Bernice came with great pomp, and they entered the audience hall with the military tribunes and the prominent men of the city. Then at the command of Festus, Paul was brought in. Okay, you can open your eyes. So there's several people here. Okay, that's kind of I hope when you closed your eyes, you thought about how many people could have possibly been there. And then Paul gets brought in. So we continue. So have this picture in your head as we continue here. And Festus said, King Agrippa and all who are present with us, you see this man about whom the whole Jewish people petitioned me. The whole Jewish people. All of them. They all have issues with this dude, is what it felt like. Probably a figure of speech. I don't know that 100% of the Jews were saying stuff, but it certainly felt like all of them. All of the Jewish people petitioned me, both in Jerusalem and here. They're not just doing it from afar. They're coming here to tell me in person. They want me to really know that they don't like what Paul is doing. They're taking time out of their work week to come travel here to tell me how much they hate him or how much they think he's guilty. They really didn't like Paul. But I found that he had done nothing deserving death. Now, why did Luke insert this comment? Because I think it's important for us to know that Festus could not find any wrong in Paul. And this is stop it. And this is exactly what happened with Jesus, right? So Jesus was found not guilty as well, but he ended up being punished. So this doesn't guarantee that Paul, although Festus believes that Paul is innocent, it doesn't mean that Paul will not get punished. Now, the difference here between Paul and Jesus is Paul is a Roman citizen and he's being tried as a Roman. So it could end up a little bit different. I won't tell you the end of the story. Don't read ahead. Don't read the Bible. Don't. That's a joke. That's a joke. I can see somebody clipping that and making a video on YouTube and being like, false pastor saying don't read the Bible. Yeah. All right. But I found that he had done nothing deserving death, and as he himself appealed to the emperor, I decided to go ahead and send him. But I have nothing definite to write to my lord about him. Therefore, I have brought him before you all, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after we have examined him, I may have something to write. He literally has nothing to tell the emperor. You have to understand how this went down, okay? Paul is accused by the Jews, all right? There is a couple of riots that ensue. Then out of this, they grab him, previous leadership, grabs him, pulls him out, puts him on house arrest, and tries to figure out what is going on. Like, what is happening? So then he stays in prison or under house arrest for 2 years. Then a new leader comes in, and he's like, literally, this makes no sense to me. So what can I write to Caesar about him appealing? Appealing to what? We have him for a reason we shouldn't even have him for. We have him because we're doing a favor to the Jewish people, not because he broke a law. We literally, what do I write? Caesar, I'm sending this guy to you. He didn't actually do anything wrong. It's just a favor for the Jews, so can you just fix the problem? That would look really bad on Festus. Hey, I came in day 3. I decided that this thing was going to go a certain way. And so we have this guy. He didn't actually do anything against the law. And I'm sending him to you to take up your time, Caesar, because it is of the law. So we're kind of doing half law and half not law. That looks really bad, doesn't it? Doesn't that look really, really bad? So Festus is like, what do? I don't even know what to write this guy. What do I say about Paul? They said some things that weren't true, so we've had him in prison for over 2 years. Then he appeals to you. Exclamation point. Like, what do you say? So he feels a little lost. He feels a little lost. And so I don't know about you, but if I came into leading something like governing or something like that, and the previous leadership like screwed everything up, like you still have stuff that you have to deal with, right? It's like we watch presidents, right? Like they flop back and forth sometimes, like Democrat, Republican. When are we going to get an independent? I'm just saying. Can we get out of this cycle? All right, so anyway, so they go back and forth, but every time they go back and forth, like especially now, it's like they always talk about how much the previous leadership like messed everything up. Like they messed everything up. And so they have to deal with each other's baggage back and forth forever. Welcome to democracy. Like we say we're doing a lot, but we barely ever do anything because we're still dealing with changing it back and forth. Why am I on such a political kick this morning? I have no idea. It's 2024. That's the only thing that matters in this year is a new president, right? Apparently. So God isn't on the throne, because it's 2024. Don't clip that either, you crazy YouTube clipper. All right. I think what I'm realizing is I need to sleep more. All right, so... All right, let's get back in here. All right, but I have nothing definite to write to my Lord about you, King Agrippa, so that after we have examined him, I may have something to write. For it seems to me, ready? See what kind of man he is. It seems to me unreasonable in sending a prisoner not to indicate the charges against him. Festus is sitting here saying, I have a prisoner whom appealed to see Caesar because he is a prisoner. When that happens, I have to indicate some things about this prisoner so that Caesar is aware of who he is, what he did, and what's going on. And what he says is, I am having trouble here in sending this guy with the charges that are against him because, in my opinion, I don't see any. What a predicament Festus is in. He's like, King Agrippa, can you please give me some insight? Like, what do I do? How does this work? I'm really unsure. if we're actually going to follow the law, it looks like we should do it this way, but this doesn't fit. So how do we handle this? And I think that he has a couple choices here. Festus could have continued to shift the blame elsewhere, right? He could have said, I don't know. He could have said that. You could have walked in and you've been like, King Agrippa, like what? King Agrippa asked him, like, so what are you going to do? I don't know. Well, what happened? I don't know. He could have done that. But Festus decided he wasn't going to be a 2-year-old, which, by the way, the one that goes, is 2. All right? And he decided that he was going to take responsibility for his job. So he's like, I don't know the answer. Do you know that taking responsibility sometimes doesn't mean you have the answer? Let that sit with you for a moment. I think what we think is we can't be responsible for something unless we have the answers. And I want you to know is like, no, taking responsibility doesn't mean you always know what you're doing. Just means no matter what you know, you try to do what is right with what you know, and you try to find out what is right. You don't just shift the blame and say, well, I don't know, it was Felix, like he kind of alluded to earlier, right? But now he's like, well, the truth is like, this is my job. I have some options here. But to be honest, if I'm going to follow suit, if we're going to follow the law, if we're going to do things the right way, I don't know what to tell Caesar. So he did not have the answer. And I want you to know this. It's better to take responsibility without having an answer than to shift the blame and pretend you have the answer. This is a detriment to the Christian faith, is when we pretend to have the answer and we shift the blame. We point fingers. It makes us feel better just like as people to say like, well, I know that I struggle, but like really, like look at them. They're way worse. Like shift the blame as hard as you can so that you make yourself feel better and so that you make yourself look better. If I could just hop back to Pharisees real quick, this is something that the Pharisees did. They also shifted the blame a lot. Did you know that many Pharisees, they had over 600 laws that they put onto people. And did you know that they didn't keep them all themselves? They said like, it wasn't monkey see, monkey do, it was monkey tell, monkey do. Okay? Monkey say, monkey do. If I tell you to do it, you should do it. Doesn't mean I have to necessarily uphold to the same standard, but you need to do it. And then, even though they would fail at keeping the law, by the way, let's see, you keep 5 laws in your house, let alone 600, okay? Let's do a throwback here. Let's say you keep 10 commandments, and they're like, 10 wasn't enough. That's the problem. We need 600. So anyway, let me get focused here. So the Pharisees were very similar in the way where they were shifting blame. They wouldn't necessarily take accountability themselves. They wouldn't take responsibility for themselves. They would say like, listen, because we're higher ups, because we're knowledgeable men, because we're wise, because we know the scriptures so well, we don't have to follow them. But you do. Not that there weren't Jews that did follow them. There were, by the way. I just want you to know that. But there were definitely Pharisees, the strictest sect of the religious community in Jerusalem, did not follow the law but wanted other people to follow it. And so we see several people shifting the blame here. Now, what about Paul? What shifting did Paul do? Did he shift any blame so far? I see that he doesn't shift any blame. Now, when we hop back in Acts 26, we're going to see what that really looks like as he makes his defense. But we won't get there for 3 weeks, so don't read it. I'm kidding. Please read it, study it, and then I'll tell you where you were wrong. No, I'm just joking. But so he so far is just being pretty honest. Every time he's come on trial, he's like, hey, you can tell me like I did these things, but I didn't do any of these things. The things that are coming against me here, I didn't do. But if you're going to tell me that, yeah, I'm guilty for believing that Jesus resurrected, you're right. I am. I am guilty to believe that. That is true. But I didn't defile the temple. I didn't bring a Gentile into the temple. I didn't break any of the Jewish laws. I kept them, and he can continue to say that. He says that against it, but then he says, but here I am. I am guilty. Not that the guilty is like I'm bad or I've done something wrong. It's just like you don't like it. So yeah, I'm guilty that I prayed before my meal, even if you don't like it. That's what I did. I'm guilty that I forgot my water bottle when I was walking up here this morning. Whether you like it or not, it actually happened, you know? And so we see Paul's integrity, and we'll continue to see his integrity follow in verse 26. Chapter 26. So as we dive into chapter 26 right now, it says this. So Agrippa said to Paul, "You have permission to speak for yourself." And that's where we're going to end. I want you to know that Paul is going to get a chance to speak. He's going to get a chance to defend himself. He's going to get a chance to say the things that are going on. And we're going to see, does Paul walk in complete integrity, or will he shift the blame as well? We saw the Pharisees shift blame. We saw Festus shift blame. I mean, in a sense, we saw Felix do it too, because he's like, hey, deal with this. You know, like, this isn't my problem, it's your problem. Not the best way to hand off the baton, but anyway, that's what happened. So as we close, I have questions for you. You guys ready for some questions? We'll bring it down to 2 questions today. You notice I've been giving you 2 instead of 3 sometimes, just making it more, easy going. All right, ready? Here's the question. And be honest with yourself. If you guys want to grow and you want to mature, it's important to actually reflect and to consider what's going on. Let me say this. Do you know scripture that is preached, that is unreflected, could only, one of the outlets of that would be toxic? So let me explain that in a different way. When a sermon is preached and you don't do anything with it, one of the results of that is that you have a toxic understanding of scripture. That is one result. Another result of hearing scripture and not doing anything with it, not reflecting on it, not asking yourself some questions. The other one is that you get a calloused or hardened heart. Statistically. This is not even like something that I'm making up. This is legit. So why do I say this? Because what I don't want is people to hear the scripture every Sunday morning, like what happens in most of Sunday morning facilities out in the world. You hear it, you don't reflect on it, and you don't do anything with it. Now, I think we might implement something at Living Hope that will help with this a little bit. Foreshadowing here, but not promising. But so, please just don't, just hear it and walk out, because what you end up doing is, you're washing in the scriptures and accidentally getting hardened to it because you're not actually applying it to your life. It's just there was another sermon. We went through Acts again, yay. But if you're not reflecting, you're not observing, you're not learning, and applying, those are 2 of the major options. Okay, so now, on to my question. When stuff, you fill in the blank for stuff, not the swear word. I know what some of you guys are thinking. When stuff goes wrong in our lives, do we blame someone or something else, or are we willing to take responsibility? When stuff happens, basically, do you take responsibility or do you shift the blame? And stuff happens all the time in our lives. Stuff just happens. It's life, unfortunately. Stuff happens. When given the opportunity, in front of your haters, whoever your haters are, fill in the blank there too, would you be honest or would you skirt around the truth? I asked it in that way on purpose because I think what happens sometimes is if we know that we're going to get a negative response, we try to say or do anything around it. We will walk around the issue, we will walk around the person, we'll do that stuff. So the question is when you're amongst people that they look down upon you, are you willing to stand there on trial and be honest and have integrity? Or do you just do something else? Do you run away? Do you hide? Do you lie because you don't want to deal with it? Let's pray. Lord, as we continue in Acts in this drawn-out series in Paul's imprisonment and what seems to be so many chapters of him having hearings and trials and different governors and house arrests and imprisonments and beatings and conversations and riots, and it just keeps piling on and piling on. It feels like we're going over the same chapter over and over and over again. And help us to realize and reflect that, like, this is what Paul actually went through. He went through a repeated process of persecution and imprisonment and questioning and trials. And Lord, so why did you put this in here? Why did you allow these chapters to be in the Word? Help us to just understand why you would want us to know that Paul was in prison for much time, that people hated him and didn't like him, that people lied about him, that people wanted to ambush and kill him. And it was literally all because he said Jesus resurrected. And so how does that apply to our lives, God? Do we not talk about the resurrection of Jesus because we're scared that we'll be stoned? In America, it's like we'll be stoned metaphorically, and we don't even necessarily want that. Is that why we do it, God? Just help us, give us some revelation for our own lives. I pray, God, that you would teach us, that you would encourage us, that you'd help us to proclaim the resurrection of Jesus to our friends, to our families, to our neighbors, to people that we meet out and about, people at work. Lord, that our lives would reflect that we believe in the resurrection of Jesus. Lord, help us to have the resurrected life that you called us to have. We are not the old creation anymore. We are the new creation. When we come to know you, that's what we are. We're new. And we're also supposed to look at others in that same light. God, I just pray that you would help us to see the things that you see and see in the ways that you see. Pray, God, that as we have the desire on accidents sometimes to shift the blame because we don't want to be to blame, or we don't want to have any consequences, or we don't want to take responsibility, I pray that you would help us mature, that you help us grow up and say, you know, I could do better here. It's not my wife's fault. It's not my kid's fault. It's not my neighbor's fault. It's not this coworker's fault. It's, although they may be making it harder, it is still my responsibility. So, Lord, help us to take responsibility and help us to be the integrity or the people of integrity that you call us to be. Pray these things in your name, Jesus. Amen.